Do you know how hatching Pokemon eggs works? No, not breeding. That's a different topic. Most people know how breeding in Pokemon works. Except, apparently, this guy. He just doesn't know how that egg got there. We're talking about what happens between the moment you receive the egg and the moment it becomes an actual Pokemon. And while there's a good amount of information online about how this works, it's not well understood by the average youngster Joey. Most people understand that you can hatch eggs by walking. After you walk a certain number of steps, the egg hatches, and you get to see whether or not shiny hunting Beldum was worth it. And this is half right. While it's well understood that taking steps decreases the time it takes to hatch your egg, it's not as simple as walk a certain number of steps. Pokemon has something called step cycles. Basically, every time you walk a certain number of steps, a hidden timer counts down in the background. And when that timer hits 0, a bunch of other counters also calculate. Some examples include increasing points for friendship or whether the daycare has an egg ready. But most importantly, it also tells the game when your egg hatches. Usually. The number of steps in a step cycle depends on the game you're playing. In generations 2, 3, and 7, step cycles are 256 steps. In generation 5 and 6, there are 257 steps. In Scarlet and Violet and Sword and Shield, there are 128 steps. And in generation 4 and Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl, step cycles are 255 steps. In connection to step cycles is a Pokemon's egg cycle, which is the counter that deducts while you complete a step cycle and have an egg in your party. Each Pokemon species has a certain number of egg cycles assigned to its egg when you receive it. The number is always the same, so a Magikarp egg will always be assigned 5 egg cycles, and a Togepi egg will always be assigned 10 cycles, no matter how many of those eggs you get. This is also the case for Pokemon you can't get in eggs by normal means. So Charizard, Mewtwo, and Ditto all have egg cycles assigned to them, even though you can't get them in eggs. In the case of evolution lines, they're usually the same number as other members of their family. So far, every Pokemon in the same evolution family as another Pokemon follows that pattern, but eventually that pattern might get broken. Anyway, back to hatching eggs. Let's use Togepi as an example. When you receive a Togepi egg, its egg cycle timer will start at 10. After you walk enough steps to complete a step cycle, its egg cycle timer will go down by 1. So if you're in Pokemon Gold and walk 256 steps, Togepi's egg cycle timer will go down from 10 to 9. Walk another 256 steps, it will go down from 9 to 8, and so on. When the timer finally reaches 0, that egg hatches. That's easy to understand. So when you hear things like it takes 2,560 steps to hatch a Togepi, it's technically right because that's how many steps you'll walk. Except when it isn't. Let's go back to our Togepi egg example for a second. When you walk that final step and the egg timer hits 0, the egg hatches. But what happens if you have 2 eggs, 3 eggs, 4 eggs, 5 eggs, 6? You can't have 6. You need at least 1 non-egg Pokemon in your party, but yeah. So you have a bunch of eggs, and their egg cycle timers are all going to hit 0 at the same time. What happens? Like before, it depends on the game you're playing. If you're playing generation 2, 3, 4, or 9, when a step cycle ends and the egg cycle timer reaches 0, the first egg will hatch and no other eggs are processed. That means when an egg's timer hits 0, every Pokemon egg after it, in party order, will stop counting its egg cycle timer. It won't go down, and if it was already at 0, it won't hatch. You'll need to complete another step cycle's worth of steps before anything will happen to them. That effectively means if you have 5 Togepi eggs, the first one will hatch at 10 cycles, the second at 11, and so on. But that assumes you don't switch them around after you obtain them. Interestingly, if you have eggs before your egg that would hatch in the party, those eggs will have their egg cycles processed, and their timers will go down. It's only the eggs after the hatched egg that will stop counting its counter. To make it simpler, think of hatching an egg as a stop sign that tells the game, no more egg stuff for now. Basically, if you want to hatch all of your eggs at a pretty decent rate, move your newer eggs to the top of your party. Otherwise, you'll probably end up walking more than necessary. Luckily, there are some games where that isn't an issue. When you finish step cycle in generation 5, 6, 7, and 8, all of the eggs in the party decrease their egg cycle timers regardless of party order. No stop signs either. If you happen to have multiple eggs whose timers reach 0, the first one will hatch. Then, after each step, the next one will hatch until all your eggs are hatched. If you do this in Brilliant Diamond or Shining Pearl, they'll all hatch in sequence, and you won't need to move, but you'll still need to press A for the "Oh" prompt. While you can hatch an egg just by walking, there are ways to speed things up. You likely know about what I call the warm abilities. From Pokemon Emerald onwards, the abilities Flame Body and Magma Armor help trainers hatch their eggs faster. In Pokemon Sword and Shield, the ability Steam Engine was also added to this group. When people describe these abilities in terms of hatching eggs, they usually say it halves the number of steps it takes to hatch. That's effectively what happens, but it's not actually what happens. Think of it this way. You have a team of 4 eggs for 4 different Pokemon that each have a different number of egg cycles left. Then you add Talonflame with Flame Body to your party. If we interpret its Flame Body ability literally, now that you have Talonflame in your party, the number of steps required to hatch your eggs would be cut in half. But consider this. If you decide, I don't feel like using Talonflame today, and put it back in the box before you take any steps, did anything actually change? Your egg steps don't go from half and suddenly jump back to full. That's because they never changed to begin with. Another more common interpretation is that Flame Body-like abilities increase the rate that your egg will hatch after each step. Again, this is half rate. It does increase the rate that your egg hatches, but it doesn't affect your steps at all. It affects the egg cycle counter. When you reach the end of a step cycle, a Pokemon's egg cycle timer will go down by the current egg cycle counter. As we said before, this number is usually 1, but there are ways to change this number, and the warm abilities are one of those ways. Basically, the game checks if you have a Pokemon with Flame Body, Magma Armor, or Steam Engine in your party. If you don't have them in your party, the counter is 1. But if you have any or all of them in your party, the egg cycle counter will change from 1 to 2. That means it does decrease the amount of steps you would need to take, but only by technicality. If you're in Brilliant Diamond and walk 255 steps with Magmar in your party, congratulations! Your Togepi Egg's egg cycle timer will go down by 2. But if you take 254 steps and decide to deposit your Magmar before you take that last step, your egg cycle counter will go back to 1. Even though you had Magmar in your party for the first 254 steps, it doesn't matter unless you walk all 255 steps to complete the step cycle. In other words, you're better off just keeping your warm ability Pokemon in your party from the moment you get the egg until the moment it hatches. Life is much easier that way. That's everything that's well researched. From here onward, it gets a little hairy. I'm kidding. Kinda. The most complicated part of egg cycles is already out of the way. Everything from here onward is relatively simple in comparison, but it involves features from games that most people overlook. First, we'll go over what I call hatching boosts. They have different names depending on the game you're playing. They include the hatching O powers from X, Y, Omega Ruby, and Alpha Sapphire, the hatching pass powers from Black, White, Black 2, and White 2, the Roto powers from Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon, and the Sandwich powers from Scarlet and Violet. We'll talk about Scarlet and Violet's sandwich powers first for sake of clarity, but just know they all behave the same. Just like the warm abilities we talked about earlier, these hatching boosts change the egg cycle counter from 1 to a different number. A hatching power in these games have 3 different levels, 1, 2, and 3. Hatching power level 1 multiplies the current egg cycle counter by 1.25. Level 2 multiplies the counter by 1.5. And level 3 multiplies the counter by 2. These powers can stack with the warm abilities if you have a Pokemon with them in your party. If you do, in that case, level 1 will multiply by 2.5, level 2 will multiply by 3, and level 3 will multiply by 4. The same logic also works with pass powers, roto boosts, and O powers. Levels 1, 2, and 3 all match across each game. The only difference is their name and the amount of time they last. There are also a handful of other game mechanics that aren't quite as linear, but they're still pretty straightforward. In Pokemon Diamond, Pearl, and Platinum, and their Gen 8 remakes, there are specific days of the year that can change the behavior of the game. It's mostly known for increasing or decreasing the encounter rate, but there are specific days that change the egg cycle counter's rate instead. While the info for the encounter rates is well known, the egg hatching info isn't really well documented. I was able to find it for Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl, but all of the decreasing rates have been removed from these games, so I can't confirm which dates will decrease the egg cycle counter in the Gen 4 games. Anyway, if you have your console's date set to any of the following dates, your egg cycle counter's rate will be multiplied by 10%. These also stack with the warm abilities and any other boosts available in these games. In Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire, some secret base trainers will have a skill called Take Care of an Egg. If you recruit these trainers to your base and apply it to one of your eggs, it'll straight up have the egg cycles remaining for that egg. Only certain kinds of trainers can have this skill. There's a little more to it based on around how secret bases work, but that's a topic for another time. Finally, in Pokemon Sun, Moon, Ultra Sun, and Ultra Moon, there's a feature called Pokepelago. Without going into too much detail about it, you can develop island resorts, and one of them, Isle Avu, is that how you say it? I'm going with it. Isle Avu can help you hatch eggs faster based on its development phase. If you place eggs here, they gradually decrease their egg cycles by 1. This happens every 4 hours if the resort is in phase 1, 2 hours if it's in phase 2, and 1 hour if it's in phase 3. You can put a total of 18 eggs here at once, and it uses the DS's real-time clock, so realistically, this is one of the best features to hatch eggs passively. While I've done a fair amount of research on these topics, I'm sure there's some errors here or there, so please feel free to comment any corrections and share this video with a friend who likes hatching Pokemon eggs.